evening, Broncos fans, and welcome to the Denver Bronco Roundup. We are brought to you by Rocky Mountain Sports Network and, of course, sponsored by Willow Seasonings and Blends. Got a great show lined up for you guys. I'm just going to welcome in our co-hosts, the ones that round out the Denver Bronco Roundup. That is Mr. Jody Moncrief and Mr. Albert Knoppers. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Man, I got quite a show lined up, guys, because we kind of blasted it out there as much as we could. But we got a little special guest this evening, man, and I'm pretty excited to have him on, guys. I'm not going to waste any more time. There's a guy that's, of course, co-founder of the Mile High Huddle, lead singer of Bridge the Gap. We're welcoming in Chad Jensen. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks for mentioning my musical bona fides there. I'm gonna tell my wife that's how they know me now by my band. Just kidding.
Absolutely,
great to be here.
man.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the show, bud. Really appreciate what you do over there at Mile High Huddle. Appreciate that album. You know, that's some killer stuff, buddy. Welcome back to the music scene, man. It's good to hear you guys.
Really appreciate that on all fronts and everything you guys mean to us as well at MHH. In our community every night, helping us keep the conversation going. Always great topics. Different angles to explore the same topics that we're breaking down. Like sometimes it feels like you're just repeating yourself over and over again. But what makes the live experience so fun is like you can take a topic that you feel like you've squashed to death, right? And then someone can come in with a different perspective and, ask a question or say something that's just a little bit different that makes you kind of re-examine the whole enchilada. Keeps it fun. And so I have you guys to thank for a lot of that too. So appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, obviously, and you've been a big supporter of us, man. We've been lucky enough to see you in the chats and drops in some stars from time to time. So
of course,
greatly appreciate it, man. Greatly appreciate it. So, Albert, you know the Dutchie over here. I don't know how much you and by the way, you can feel free to say hello to Dutchie because I know that you guys go back a little bit too. You guys even had a meet and greet, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Albert and I and his great wife Michelle, we go back a few years. We've hung out in person. What's up, Michelle? We've hung out in person 3 times, maybe 4 times. I don't know, many times. So yeah,
very good.
A lot in common. And great people. Always love hanging out with the Knoppers.
There you go, man. And maybe new to you then, Jody. We call him the judge over here on the Denver Bronco Roundup. But Jody, well, introduce yourself to Chad and Chad to Jody, and
what's up,
and
bro?
Welcome everybody.
Dropping the gavel, Jody.
What's up?
All right, guys.
Thanks for being on.
The Judge. There's a hardcore band called Judge from New York City. They're pretty heavy, but. Check them out, dude. Maybe that's your spirit animal band. You just never knew it.
All right, now we're getting listening advice as well, man. I appreciate it. We thought this was going to be a Bronco show, but speaking of maybe not just being about a Bronco show, we come on once a week, Chad. We just happen to be on the heels though of a Nuggets championship though too, man. Congratulations to the Denver Nuggets, and I know Jody's psyched about that. He's a big Nuggets fan, so. You were watching it with anticipation as the clock ticked down and the rebounds went to the Nuggets' possession and celebration rained down in Mile High City last night, buddy.
Huge win. Glad to see the Nuggets finally hoist their first trophy.
Amazing. Yeah. 47 years, man.
Great night other than the 11 people that got shot after the game.
I didn't. Well,
I had not heard heard about this.
Yeah, I guess after celebrating, 11 people got shot. Got a little too crazy, I guess.
Got a little crazy. Okay, well, thanks. We usually try to keep this a little bit more positive, but thanks for bringing some levity to the show, there, Judge. I appreciate it. I'm sure that'll all appear later in front of you, maybe. So, but no, congratulations to the Nuggets, man. Honestly, these guys undervalued, underdepreciated, all throughout. National media and even in the NBA. Joker should have had 3 MVPs in a row. It's even more obvious now that this championship has come to Denver for the first time. But what a run and so many great storylines. Speaking of which, We are brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Sports Network. I know they'll be having some stuff going on over there. Check them out at RockyMountainSN.com. So, guys, we're going to get into the main topic. Like I said, position groups is what we've been doing week to week. We kind of saved this one just for Chad because little special guest, give him a nice meaty topic. So we're going to just want to break down and evaluate, I guess, Russell Wilson and this Denver Broncos quarterback room as it sits. And, I know that you struggle with this, Chad. StreamYard's a little bit glitchy. I've went to paper now. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I've noticed it hasn't, for what it's worth. It's been a long time since I've been in a StreamYard studio where it's not my account doing the stream, right?
Yep.
And I've noticed so far, like I just barely navigated to a couple of tabs, so I have a couple of resources in front of me, and so far so good.
Yeah.
So maybe it's if you're the one streaming, I don't know.
I think that's what it is. I think it's the guy that's putting it all together. The co-hosts come in, they're doing just fine. So I think that we've noticed that as well. But this is what I wanted to start off with. There have been a lot of improvements to this Denver Broncos football team. Whether you want, and when you specifically start talking about this offense, you can point towards Mike McGlinchey, you can point towards Ben Powers, and you can talk about Sean Payton coming to this offense. I'll let our guest go first, but my question is, how much is Russell Wilson going to improve? Not the pieces around him, not the coaches. How much improvement do you expect from last year to this year from Russell Wilson himself?
Dude, I think it's going to be palpable. I think people are going to perceive it like night and day. And all of the emotions that they had, the excitement fans had when the trade was consummated last year, and the dreams of what could be, all of a sudden, it's going to all come crashing back in the best way. And I don't mean like overnight, all of a sudden he's going to turn into second coming of Peyton Manning 2013, but just how long has it been since Broncos fans have witnessed like above level competency at quarterback sustained over the course of an entire season? Even that, it's going to seem like, golly, it's going to feel like Peyton Manning, even if he's just like a slightly above average quarterback in 2023. But I think Russ, because of Sean Payton, I mean, the details and just the way that Sean Payton perceives the game and the nuances with which he kind of approaches it and attacks it, and how that trickles down to everybody. I mean, one of the biggest things, especially last year with Russ in Denver, was it didn't matter what the situation was. Any slightly elevated situation could be a third down, could be red zone, could be end of game, whatever. When the stakes were slightly elevated, Russ and his teammates never seemed prepared for those moments. And there's a reason why. I mean, you think, well, Russ, you're this, what was he last year? 11th year vet. Don't you think you should maybe be able to see which way the wind's blowing in these situations? And to some degree, that's absolutely true. Again, he shares plenty of complicity in what happened, but it's because his coaches don't know how to prepare. It's because his coaches didn't put he and his teammates through the freaking paces to make sure that they had all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. It's like Sean Payton talks about, when you see some bold call that gets made on fourth down late in the game and you're like, wow, that was a great gutsy decision that he kind of pulled out of his rear end. He's like, no. That decision was made on Wednesday. That was a decision that was made on Wednesday. You're just seeing it come to fruition, coming out of the hat, so to speak, on Sunday. And so I just think in all the ways that you saw the quarterbacks shine under Peyton in New Orleans, whether it was Hall of Famer to be Drew Brees or any of the guys that had to step in for those small stretches when Brees was out, take like the uptick in production that you saw like a middling guy like Teddy experience under Sean Payton, and then apply that to an actual 9-time Pro Bowler, apply that to a guy who had already built himself a Hall of Fame career before he even came to Denver. So I'm staying away a little bit from like super specific bold predictions, just because I don't know what this offense is going to look like. I don't think it's going to look like what Sean did all those years in New Orleans. But I think Broncos fans, when this season is over, they're going to be so stoked that they kind of wrote it out, and they're going to be happy with the trade instead of the bitterness everybody feels kind of right now.
By the way, this is Michael Ronquillo that jumping in saying good
Yo,
evening.
Mikey.
Yeah, good old Michael Ronquillo. So we appreciate him over here, just like you guys appreciate him over there on the Mile High Huddle. He's saying good evening, Keith, Jody, Albert, and Chad. So good evening to you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping in. Appreciate you being here. So I completely understand where you're coming from, Chad. It's really easy to start looking at, again, the pieces that have been brought in and around. And the reason I keep trying to phrase this is because maybe a little bit later in this topic we'll get to, the possibility of moving on from Russell Wilson if things don't go perfect. So really I'm looking, and I'll go to Albert next, and then we'll round it out with Jody. Keep in mind, guys, Chad has been super generous. This is a guy that not only has a ton going over on at Mile High Huddle, has that fantastic band, Bridge the Gap, and everything they got going on over there. Tries to run a family as well, and has a dog that we were just talking about before the show. So, he's given us 30 minutes, guys. We'll try to keep it somewhat short so that we can, maximize the time that we have with Chad. So, Albert, what are you expecting improvement-wise from Russell Wilson? All other things taken out of consideration.
So we finally have a head coach that can adapt. And with the previous one, you had a head coach that wanted to make a kicker, quarterback, and a quarterback pocket passer that is not a pocket passer. So I think we have a much better situation. Head coach Sean Payton can adapt to the situation, and that is what we were lacking last year. We had a playbook. Oh, this game. We're going to stick to this play, even if we already know it's going to be a bad prediction. But they were sticking to it, and I think we are not going to see that. I think we have a head coach that will adapt, and maybe he will give Russell some free agency to play to call plays as well, because that is when Russell was able to do that. We saw some good plays.
And I was going to bring that up, if we really talk about, going back to what Chad said and kind of what you're saying too, there was days when we talked about, in Seattle, let Russ cook, right? They wanted Russ to be able to be Russ. If you're constantly trying to put that round peg in that square hole, it's just not going to work. And that's a lot of what we saw last year. Sometimes it's not about, what the coach can do for you. Sometimes maybe it's about the coach maybe getting in the way of what you can do best. And I think we saw a little bit of that last year. Even relieving that will help Russell Wilson, let alone what we'll get from having a coach like Sean Payton come in and be able to bring him beyond that. So, Jody, let's round it out, buddy. Judge is going to give us the determination, I think, here, buddy.
I think Russ is. You're going to see much improved play from head coach, who's competent in all aspects of the game. They've improved this O-line. Russ was at his best when he had a great running game, and I expect that this year they're going to lean heavy on that. And I think Sean Payton is going to be smart enough to run plays that fit Russ. And he's got loads of weapons. He's got underrated wide receivers. He's got wide receivers that have chips on their shoulders. Jerry Jeudy, Sutton, even Tim Patrick coming off the injury. And I think Russ losing the weight, I think that's going to make him more mobile. I think it's going to cut down on the injuries. I think that was a big problem last year. I think he's going to run. Peyton's going to force him to be a timing quarterback. If he doesn't throw the ball, run. Don't just stand back there and take hits. I think this will be the year you see Russ take his few sacks of the season. And I expect, and I've been saying it for a while, I expect a big year from Russ. Bounce back year. And I'm with Garrett Bowles. There's going to be a lot of people at the end of the day that's going to be eating crow.
Yeah, that black crow, man. I tell you, it's a little gnarly. It's tough to eat, a little tough to gnaw on. You don't want to be doing it all too often. So we got and Facebook users, I apologize. I'm looking off to the side, making sure that we can see everything here as well. But we got Roy Osborne coming in. Nice to see you, Keith, Jody, Albert, and the priest chat. I have plenty of time to listen to all of you guys since I'm out with a back injury. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, dude. Third pod of the day for me, Broncos country. Well, hey man, appreciate you tuning in, buddy. Sorry about that back injury, man. I'm wishing you the best, man. Wishing you well.
That sucks,
Take
dude.
care.
I broke my back in 2007,
Oh,
and it's not fun, bro. So much love and respect and thoughts and prayers. It can be a slog.
man, I thought it was bad when I had my back just out of place, which happens from time to time. Sciatic nerve is getting rubbed a little bit. That hurts, but man, never a broken back, not an injury like you guys are talking about. So take care of yourself, Roy. Boy, that's rough. He brings up a good point, man. You are one of the priests over there at the Mile High Huddle, which, by the way, it might explain some of my nervousness. I, go back in my history. I was an altar boy, so having a priest present, I'm just kidding, but
Here's the thing, though. You know where that comes from? I'll tell you where that comes from.
I appreciate it, man. I like a little story.
Is back when Zach and I were doing actually, this phrase started before Zach came on my podcast. So I started my podcast like circa the podcast that it is today. It's obviously evolved and morphed quite a bit over the years, but that was started in right after Super Bowl 50. All right. So MHH had existed as a publication for 2 or 3 years by that point. But
Okay.
when I first started, I was doing it with Luke Polglaze, who was one of the founding staffers at MHH. And then he ended up getting into coaching. And so Will Keys, who is a guy I found that's a great writer, phenomenal writer. He now works with Brandon Perna over on That's Good Broncos and That's Good Sports and stuff. But he was my partner for, I don't know, about a year on the pod, but it was on demand. So we would record them ahead of time, right? Chop them up, do like one for post game. Then we'd do it again, in the middle of the week and kind of like a preview episode. So there'd be like 2. And then we decided to start doing 3. And on Friday, we'd make it like mailbag oriented. So we put questions out on our social media or, calls out for questions. And then out of the blue one day, I just spit it out. I just said, we are your football priests. Each and every week, we're here to offer you the absolution and answers to your burning Broncos questions. And it just ended up being in this pre-recorded podcast, right?
Right.
And then people immediately, the listeners started throwing that back. And it wasn't like how it is now where like you get that feedback immediately in a live setting like this with the chat, go out into the RSS feed and then people start hitting you up on Twitter, whatever. And so I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Okay. So I just kept, anytime we did mailbag, that's what I would say. And then it just kept morphing to a point where when Zach and I started doing it and our audience just like rocked into the stratosphere because we started doing it live, then it just kind of took on a life of its own. People use that verbiage now 10 times more than we do. We just did it kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, that's the history.
Rolling off the cuff right in the middle of a podcast, and it just takes off, man.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That's cool, bud. That's cool, man. Good story, man. I like that, man. You always wonder, you don't usually, I don't know. You don't ever get to usually hear the backstories on a lot of these things. So I appreciate you sharing, buddy.
Sure.
I want to get to one more question because I know time is a little bit ticking with
We're
us.
okay.
And
Don't trip too hard on the time. We're good. Don't worry about it.
Okay, buddy. All right. Well, this is kind of an elongated one anyway, so I was hoping I'd be able to get it all in. So already kind of a little bit of a two-part question. I'll go back around the horn, and we'll start with Jody on this one. And for me, I want to know what record, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to be the Russell Wilson hater, anything like that. If the Broncos start 0 and what number do the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton, move away from Russell Wilson and take a look at Jarrett Stidham? Jody, what's your thoughts, man? I think you might be muted, buddy.
Sorry, I would say probably after. I mean, if he's playing like he was last year after week 5.
0 and 4, 0 and 5.
0 and 4, 1 and 4, something like that.
I won
What?
the 0-4, 0-4.
Four.
Then they move on.
4, I guess.
All right,
I
buddy.
really haven't thought about it because I just don't see that.
I understand, man, and I'm going to give the opportunity to go the opposite way on the second part of this question. So, Albert, how about for you, man? Broncos start off 0 and
I believe in Russell Wilson, but if the first 3 games there should be winnable games. If it is 0-3, I think the fourth game they will try it with Stidham.
very good, buddy. 0-3 from Albert. Mr. Chad Jensen, what do you think, sir?
I really don't think it's going to happen. I think Russ is, even if it wasn't like a favorable schedule to open the first quarter of the season, I don't see it happening with Sean Payton. But just for the sake of our conversation, you know how it works in the league, man.
Mm-hmm.
If you get on a 1-game losing streak, people start to question, start throwing out these type of questions, right? Then when it becomes a 2-game losing streak, then you start actually feeling a little bit of a clamor from outside the building, more of like an anxiety, right? Where you know that after 2 games, if it happens, twice, then it starts probably infecting the building a little bit, where the conversations are now being had amongst the coaches. And then if it stretches into 3, like they start 0-3, then I think Sean Payton, in the interest of good faith, in the interest of keeping fans happy, respecting the contract, because they're paying this dude whether he's on the field or not. I think he says, look, we're going to go 4 games. After 4 games, if they're still 0-4 or like Jody was saying, if we're getting the same version of Russ that we saw last year, then maybe a change gets contemplated. But I don't know. I think with Sean Payton, he's not so much in like this emergency, oh my God, I got to save my job situation. Like, I think he's going to think on a much more macro level. I think because of that, he's going to have probably a lot more patience in a lot of different ways that people don't, like Nathaniel Hackett, constant panic when things start going sideways, man. It's like, shoot, I don't want to become one of 2 coaches in the Super Bowl era to be fired before my first year's even over. Oh, shoot, that happened. So I don't know. I really don't think it's gonna happen. But I would say after 4 games is when it would probably truly be confronted as an issue.
I'll put an asterisk to that, though. If Russ is playing well and the D is letting him down or something, then I can see where
a longer leash is given.
A longer leash is given.
Nuance.
Yeah.
I agree, and I know this is a tough question. Like I said, I don't want to be the hater. I didn't want to be the bad guy. But, hey, let's face it, the Denver Broncos went out and they invested in a backup. They didn't go out and just try to go cheap. They didn't just bring Brett Rippon along for the ride for another year. They invested quite a bit into Jarrett Stidham. There is a possibility of the Broncos moving on from Russell Wilson. I went through and for me, and I don't know if this is the time or the place within the conversation, but I went through and I looked at any quarterback that was the age of Russell Wilson or older that played last year. 12 games or more. That consisted of 2 guys that we can already cross off the list, in Tom Brady and Matt Ryan, who are no longer going to be in the league, it looks like, at this point. That leaves us with Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton, Aaron Rodgers, and Ryan Tannehill. That's not a very impressive list of quarterbacks who are performing at a high level at Russell Wilson's age. So there does need to be a plan to move forward from Russell Wilson at some point. And there are some possibilities in the contract that, hey, if sooner or later we need to start looking at Jarrett Stidham or a future rather than Russell Wilson, we could see that next year. It is a possibility. I don't think the and whatever start is going to what brings it about, though. I'll agree with every single one of you on that.
And I think we have another game changer here, and that is Sean Payton.
100%,
Last year we had so many games that was just within 1 score, and Hackett couldn't do it. And Sean Payton can do it. He can change that around.
I agree with you, buddy.
And I think that's where and if Russell is listening to Sean Payton, and we have those close score games, I think even after 4 games, I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm just going to disagree with you shortly, Albert. I think that, quite honestly, Sean Payton is that disciplined type of coach that makes sure that he, does what's right for the team, does what's right for himself, for his coaches, for all the people involved on that team, all the teammates, everything. And if that means moving on from Russell Wilson and getting somebody else on the field, I don't think he has any hesitation to do so. And the nice thing is he's not a first-time head coach where that's questioned. At that point, I think, as a lot of people have said, in Sean Payton we trust, I think if that day comes where we have to move on from Russell Wilson, we will be trusting in Sean Payton and the move that he's making at that point. I want to go to the positive side of things, go back around the horn, and then we'll see how much more time you have, Chad. Go from there, buddy. I want to know what record, and I don't care if you can put whatever scenario around the record you want. What record are Broncos fans, you, the Walter Penner Group, Sean Payton, George Payton, at what record and what scenario are they all lined up behind Russell Wilson, bringing him back next year, looking at him as the quarterback of the future?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is too much gets made of, it gets minimized. Let me put it this way, too much, how they could just move on from Russ next year. Guys, if they move on from Russell Wilson, depending on what point of the year they do it, if they do it before June 1st, it's almost a $90 million dead cap hit, okay? If they do it after and designate him post June 1, it's still almost $35 million in dead cap they're eating. So at that point, it's what's more valuable to you, Russell Wilson on the roster and you see what happens, or, no Russ and you're still eating so much of that contract. But I only say that because I know we already got off that, but I only say that because for a team to justify eating that amount of dead money, it's got to not just be not good enough. It's got to be categorically, this is horse crap. We got to do this to save face type thing, and I just can't see in any way, shape, or form under Payton it shaking out that way. But I think everyone gets excited about Russell Wilson and feels confident about him playing out the duration of his contract moving forward under Sean Payton at a plus 500 record. I mean, it could be 9-8, and I think everyone's like, okay, we're moving in the right direction, because what's it been? It's been 6 years since the Broncos posted a plus 500 record. I mean, 2016, Gary Kubiak's last season. I mean, they did finish 9-7, even though they didn't make the playoffs. So I don't think that's a gift horse the Broncos necessarily look in the mouth. I think they would interpret that as, hey, we did do the right thing. We got a quarterback 2 years ago, and then we went out, we hired the right guy to kind of turn the ship around. And if we were able to take this many steps forward in our first year with Sean Payton, imagine what we can do with another year of the system sinking its roots, another year of the personnel department kind of taking on the image of the coach, and just how all these schemes are going to be shaken out and all that stuff. So I think as long as the Broncos get to, even if they don't make the playoffs, honestly, but even think of this, they get to 9-8. Okay. That's almost doubling their win total from the year before. It's still not necessarily what Broncos fans are accustomed to, traditionally in terms of levels of excellence, right? And being double-digit win teams that go to the playoffs, and even if we don't win it all, we're in the conversation. Still, it would still be a far cry from that, going say 9-8 and missing the playoffs. But after 7 years of literally setting up shop and dwelling in the NFL doldrums, I think that would be interpreted by everybody within the actual building as okay, we're on the right track here.
That's good, man. And I like how you phrase that, because like I said, paint the scenario, not just the record. Heck, we could be 7-10 and in the playoffs for some wild scenario. We could be 10-7 and outside the playoffs. I don't want to just base it on a record alone. You can paint the scenario around it. Albert, over to you, sir. What do you think? What brings you excitement to bring back Russell Wilson next year, and maybe those around us as well, Denver Broncos community?
I even think with an 8-9 season that we barely barely missed a winning season. As long as there's a lot of improvement, I think Russell will stay. And if they, because it will take a time to get back into a full system, because there's a brand new system they're going to play in, and it will take time. And I think if they are really close to a winning season, even with an 8 and 9, I think Russell stays.
Very good. Roy is the one I flashed up here. Again, I'll fill you in on the comments. Roy Osborne thinks our guy laid up with his bad back saying 8 or 9, 9 or 8. That's kind of what he was thinking about the same thing. Jody, the judge, what are you thinking, buddy? What gets you excited?
I'm not really records, but I need to see Russ back to his own self. I need to see him moving the ball, keeping third downs alive, and put up. I mean, don't expect huge numbers from Russ. He's not a 300 passing yards a game, 4 touchdown quarterback. That he's never been that. I expect something in the way of 250, 275, 2 touchdowns. But what I want to see is keeping drives alive on third down, moving the ball, and that will lead to wins, because Sean Payton, and I go, one game that sticks in my mind is the Colts game last year. With Sean Payton there, he forces Russ to run the ball there. They kick the field goal. They go up 10. They win that game. You know, things like that Sean Payton will make Russ do, and that will turn into wins. So, I mean, honestly, for me, I probably a minimum of 10 wins is what I really want to see from Russ this year.
And that's fair, man. Like I said, you want to be excited. You want to be behind your quarterback. I think 10 wins is we went through schedule, when it first came out. We started picking off wins and losses. We were all pretty excited, I think, about what the Broncos are capable of. I think for us to expect 10 wins off of what our predictions were, yeah, absolutely. I think there's precedence there. And heck, I think all of Broncos country, if we're sitting at 10 and 7 come the end of the year, as Chad pointed out, compared to where we were at last year, catastrophically different than where we were sitting. We would have to be ecstatic about how Broncos country, and how the Broncos performed, regardless. Like I said, I don't care if it's 10 and 7 and for some reason we missed the playoffs. That's the way it played out. We played very well throughout the entire season. Chad, do you have 2 more seconds?
Yeah, I've got like 5 more minutes.
All right. 5 more minutes. I want to really pass it over to my co-host and see, hey, do you have any questions that you have for Chad? And what would you like to pick his brain about? And, hey, I'll start off with Jody, go down to Albert, and then we'll let Chad jump out of here, if that's okay with you, Chad.
Absolutely. Of course.
Yeah, I do have one. Was Sean Payton your first choice for head coach? If not, who was and why?
In the early going, I was like super high on the idea of Jim Harbaugh. As time kind of marched on and I got more, because at first it just seemed like if Sean Payton would have been completely a free agent, it would have been a different thing. All right. But my rationale at the time was, all right, how big of a difference is there really in terms of the end result between Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton, when it would cost you some premium draft capital to get one, and the other one you just got to pay him? Not to make light of how much money has to be paid to these guys, but you get my point. Yeah. But then as we kind of matriculated farther into the hiring cycle and the NFL season kind of came to an end, and I spent more time, like, really as a guy who makes a living covering the Broncos, studying Sean Payton, watching all his interviews, like when he would do little side stuff, whether it was, Colin Cowherd's show or various TV and radio appearances, and really starting to kind of listen to what he was saying when he would be asked about the Broncos, not necessarily as like, hey, would you be interested in coaching the Broncos? But when he would get asked Bronco topics, whether it was Russ, the offense, whatever, and listening to how he would answer things, I started getting more like, okay, yeah. Maybe this could be a bridge that could be crossed, because, and then it took a conversation, because all things being equal, Sean Payton would have been number one in my mind, just because of his pedigree and the fact that he's been to the top of the mountain and his history with quarterbacks in the league. It took a conversation with our producer, Scott Kennedy, and just the way he explained it. He goes, dude, look at it like this. You're all like, being anal retentive about giving up that first round pick, and maybe a little bit more to get Sean Payton. But what if, in the middle of the season, as bad as things were, if someone came to you and said, hey, would you trade Bradley Chubb so that Sean Payton could come in right now and fix this? Would you do that? And the way he put it, I was like, in a heartbeat, I would do that. I wouldn't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
Right? So then all of a sudden I got my thinking cap on in a different way. And, but I think it all shook out the right way, Jody. I think that Sean Payton was, a lot of people in the early goings when Sean Payton did make it clear he was actually interested in rejoining the NFL coaching ranks. A lot of people were like, nah, the only reason he's even interested in Denver is because of that Walmart money, baby. Not true, dude. He could have gotten that money from almost any team that was actually interested in hiring him. He liked the way things were in Denver, not just the owner. I mean, obviously we know how much the front office and ownership that meant in the Sean Payton choosing Denver equation, but he's always been, in my opinion, now this is not a fact, like I'm texting back and forth with Sean Payton, but I think he's always been much more excited at the prospect of coaching Russell Wilson than all of his detractors might think, because it's kind of like if you guys saw that Frank Clark interview that was done by Brandon Marshall during the Super Bowl, right before the Super Bowl, and it kind of got kicked back up again because he just got signed by the Broncos. And he's like, look, dude, how quickly people forget what a guy has done in the league. Like, takes one bad year, one subpar year for people to forget. And that's what happens in the general sense. I'm a fan too, so what I'm about to say, don't act like I'm talking down on anybody, but that's what happens with fans. We overreact. We take it to the extreme. We jump the shark. But Sean Payton doesn't think that way. Sean Payton's inside baseball, so to speak, analytical. He knows how the sausage gets made, and I think he was always way more excited about the prospect of what still could be done. How much meat was left on that bone with Russell Wilson. So anyway, long-winded way of answering your question, though, Jody. It started as Jim Harbaugh, but eventually I was actually more excited about the prospect of Payton.
Very good, man. Albert, over to you, buddy. Give you your chance.
Okay, so now we have a different defensive coach, Vance Joseph, and we have made some acquisitions like Frank Clark. Where do you think our defense stands?
See, that's something that a lot of guys at Mile High Huddle, they have, I don't really share a brain with them on. They kind of really overreacted over the Vance Joseph thing. A lot of guys, just because they're still kind of governed by the bad taste in the mouth that everyone, of course, still has over his 2 years in Denver. And I get it that, if you go look at how the Cardinals did the 4 years he was there, nothing that's going to like really make you go, whoa, wow. He had a couple of really good years, not a couple of great years, a couple of really good years coordinating that defense, and then a couple of kind of fair to middling years. Only one of those years really was his defense being complemented by a force to be reckoned with on the other side of the ball. And so I think, knowing what we know about VJ, his style of defense, and we're learning more and more, by the way, that, what we think we know about the Vance Joseph defense, which is basically from a philosophical perspective, it's the same thing as the Wade Phillips defense. Not afraid, same base defense, not afraid to throw numbers in a blitz, likes to play a lot of man coverage. All that stuff is very similar to Wade Phillips. But what we're learning more and more by the day is that the Broncos and Vance Joseph, they're really trying to make this new defense from a schematic perspective, kind of a amalgamation between the stuff he's always done and what has been happening here with the current core of players over the last, since Fangio arrived, since 2019, because Giro Evero did not change anything. He didn't change anything. There were some coverage principles, like how he called games was different, but from what players had to learn from a verbiage perspective, responsibility, technique, none of that changed. And so, that's a continuity factor. People wonder how the defense has just managed to kind of, be the tip of the spear all these years. And one of the reasons for that has been continuity, especially in recent history. And so they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. No, we're going to do it my way. I mean, this was something Alex Singleton talked about today. Is like he's been very impressed by how Vance Joseph came in and said, all right, how much can we keep from what the guys know? Josie Jewell, Justin Simmons, the young guys that have been around the last couple of years for basically the Fangio scheme, and kind of marry that with what I do and what I know works and my core philosophies that I believe in. And that's what they've done. And so I think that's a really good Albert harbinger of what to expect coming, 23 and beyond, in that I think it's going to look very similar to what people are used to in terms of playmaking ability. But because of Vance Joseph's, what's a good word for it? Penchant for pressure. All right. And his lack of fear in, sending numbers at the quarterback, I think you're going to see, even with a less than ideal edge rushing group, I think you're going to see a lot more pressure on the quarterback because the offense is going to score more points. And there's going to be teams that are going to be in situations where they have to pass. And Vance won't be afraid to throw numbers. You're going to see what happens when you get more pressure on the queue. You get forced decisions, you get early decisions, you get bad decisions, you get balls tipped, you get picks, you get fumbles, all this stuff. So I think that's going to play in their favor. And then from a personnel perspective, I mean, my biggest concerns on the defense before last week was edge production, like proven edge production. Because Randy Gregory, look, if you can keep him on the field for a full season, I mean, he's as good as any like veteran edge that you could hope the Broncos could get right now. But it's like you can't really count on that if you look at his resume. And then beyond him, it was just a who's who of young guys with upside, zero production in the league. They needed at least one more guy to kind of hedge against some of that, and they got that with Frank Clark. So that was my big concern. I'm still a little worried about defensive line depth, but if even one of the two guys they drafted last year, Wazirike or Henningsen, take a step forward, it'll probably be okay. And then a little bit of cornerback depth. Otherwise, I think personnel is going to be just fine from a continuity perspective too, getting back Kareem. Like, I think the defense is going to be also just like the emotional lift and surge they're going to get from not having to always carry the team. That we don't know the limits of how that can really elevate the entire squad. So I'm actually pretty stoked on the defense. A lot of people that talk about the Broncos or write about the Broncos, they have a lot of misgivings about VJ. I really don't.
All right, Chad. I just have one question for you, and maybe a little bit of a follow up. What's going on with Bridge the Gap? What can we expect next? And then, honestly, buddy, anybody that we bring on a guest, if you want to plug anything of yours, feel free. Give us a few minutes of that. But what's happening with Bridge the Gap? Second studio album. I know that you're doing I know you got some dates lined up. So feel free to talk about it, buddy.
Well, Bridge the Gap, if I could just do one thing and not have to worry about bills my whole life, it has always been and still is and would be music. Like, that's my first love. I mean, technically, the Broncos are my first love if you look at it from chronological order. I mean, I was Bronco fiend in the 80s, as a child with Three Amigos and Elway on my wall and all that stuff. But as a grown man, that's where it was for me. But I put that all to the side. You get married, you have a family, you got demands, you got this and that. And when my Bronco business became what it became with Mile High Huddle, I'm not looking that gift horse in the mouth. I'm very, very blessed individual. And so last year we just decided, hey, you know what? Let's go do what we always wanted to do. Let's kind of get the dudes back together. And we took 2 weeks in the summer when there was no football. We went and tracked that album, and we did it really just as something to do, something fun, something that we dreamed we could have done when we were younger, that we're now in the position to do. But once we actually got back with the music and started exposing it to people, we realized, oh, we're actually going to have to do something with this. People like it. It's actually pretty good. And I don't say that to like toot my own horn. So we found a record label, right, to put it out, People Punk Rock Records. And then like it just keeps growing and getting bigger and bigger with how many people are listening, the social media and all that stuff. So now it's kind of taken it from just a fun thing, passion project that we wanted to do. And it's turned it a little bit more into like, all right, we maybe kind of have to do something with this because people are demanding it. So, for now we're just doing show here and there. Next year we're going to play a bunch of festivals because we weren't really prepared to do anything with it this year. I mean, like, you guys know what my grind is every single week, and a lot of the stuff I can do, or that I can do from like a laptop anywhere as far as blogging and writing and stuff. But like with my podcast and everything else, like, I can't go on the road to Europe for 2 weeks. And there's opportunities for us to do that right now, but we didn't really have it laid out to be ready to do that. But next year we will. So we'll be doing a lot more as far as like playing festivals next year, probably go to Europe, probably do some stuff like that.
Wow.
And then in the spring, probably go back to the Blasting Room with Bill Stevenson and record the second Bridge the Gap album. So, but in the meantime, between now and then, we're just having fun, continuing to see the social media grow and selling LPs on the Bridge the Gap merch.com. So it's been fun. And thank you, Keith, for supporting, bro. I really appreciate it.
No, man. Honestly,
and Albert.
Man. And Albert and Jody, will get him on board too. If nothing else, he'll buy all the Judge albums. I don't know, maybe.
Well, listen, punk rock might not. It is the best music in the world, but it might not be for everybody. I understand that.
There you go, buddy. Well, I'll be honest. That skate punk, we're about the exact same age, and believe it or not, I think if I understand, researching your old band, we grew up on opposite ends of the same state. I was at the north end of Utah. Sounds like you grew up in
what part?
Tremont, Utah, about as north as you can get, man. You're
literally,
about as south as you can get.
Polar ends of Utah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, man, Chad, thank you so much, man, for joining us, for giving us more than a half hour, man. You've given us like 50 minutes almost, man. Fun. So I appreciate you so much. Go check them out. Mile High Huddle. Check out Bridge the Gap. You don't have to be a punk fan. You'll love that music, guys. Check it out. You can give it a listen, and if you really like it, you head over to bridgethegapmerch.com and pick it up. Grab that album.
As good as any plug I could have given it, so thank you.
Oh yeah, not a problem, bud. Chad, I'll see you on one of your pods. You'll see us again over on one of ours. Thank you so much.
For sure.
And have a great night.
Thank you, Chad.
Jody, nice to meet you.
Sid.
And
yes, you too. Thank you.
Seeing you guys in the stream. Thanks for having me.
All right, man.
Absolutely.
Have a great night, man. Take care of that dog, that family. All right. Yeah, that was great, man. It's good having Chad in here.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have one of the priests in here and all the knowledge that they have.
Absolutely. I did want to get caught up on some comments. We only had so much time with Chad. I didn't want to take any time away from him, but I appreciate everyone that's jumping in here as well. It was Michael Ronquillo that came in and said Sean Payton was my choice for the Broncos as well. Roy Osborne coming in and said Sean Payton said that ownership means a lot, and that's 100% true. And Roy also jumping in and saying, I actually like the tunes. Pretty cool, to be honest. Yeah, it's I love Bridge the Gap, man. If you guys really, Jody, if you haven't, you need to check him out, man. He's all over
I've listened
iTunes.
to a few songs on YouTube. They're pretty good.
They're pretty good. All right, very good. But we love everything that Chad brings to Broncos country, man, and his takes and his thoughts and his ideas, man. So appreciate you guys jumping in. I thought we were going to have one more guest. I haven't seen him jump in as of yet, and I don't know how much more time we're going to be on here, but I wanted to go around the horn to you guys. This was our main topic. We already ran, like I said, about 50 minutes, but I wanted to see if you guys had anything else from the last week that you wanted to talk about before we got out of here, guys. And Jody, I'll give it back up to you one more time, man. Oh no, Jody might be a little. Oh, there we go. He's unfrozen. Maybe.
Sorry.
There we are. It's okay, man. I understand the internet. Believe me.
The Frank Clark signing, I think it's a big signing. If you just go look at his numbers, he's not a 15 sack guy, but he's been on a veteran team, but a team that knows how to win, brings veteran leadership. And whatever that was 2 years ago, he had a dominant run in the playoffs when he had like 5 sacks.
5 sacks in the playoffs. Jody's a little frozen, and that's about where we left him off. Hopefully he'll come back in here in just a moment. So 5 sacks in that playoff run, Jody, and then you can continue on from there, bud.
Yeah, 5 sacks in the playoff run. Then it just brings in good veteran leadership and depth. Bummer about Baron Browning. I expected him or had all hopes that he was going to have a monster year. He was out in California training with the same guy that Von Miller was training with the year Von Miller got shredded and had his best sack season. So it's a bummer that that had to happen. Hopefully he's back before the start of the season, because I think he is poised to have a big season if he can come back healthy and it's not a nagging injury all year.
I think it was going to be a key piece to what they really had for that position for the Broncos, and for Baron Browning to have a setback at this point. It is very disappointing. Like I said, like you said, like I'm saying, I think he was going to be a key piece, a pivotal piece. I think he was going to be utilized a ton. I really feel, I mean, maybe it's just because there's so many names and this roster is so big right now. But my goodness, it just feels like there's going to be like a heavy rotation of guys that'll probably not feel that so much like that once this all gets thinned out. And I'm kind of nervous, anxious. I don't know how to put it. I think there's going to be some names that we're like, oh, really? That guy got let go? It's a big drop from where we're at right now all the way down to 53. And I think there's a few names will surprise you. Speaking of surprising, Kenny says that Dalvin Cook has been officially released. Any chance the Broncos take a shot at signing him? By the way, Albert, Alexander Madison will be the rushing leader this year. Laugh out loud. Well, it may not be Saquon Barkley, I can tell you that. Doesn't sound like he's too happy to even come to camp and maybe not even be playing this year, which, wow, what a big change that would make for the Giants' plans and Brian Dable there and what they had planned. But that being said, I'll just go around the horn real quick. Does Dalvin Cook get signed, and what dollar sign would you sign Dalvin Cook, Albert?
If there's a shot on Dalvin Cook to get here, then yeah, why not? And
Why
I
not?
would say, why not? And I think we have about $5 million left. Sign him for a 1-year deal for $5 million.
Just max it all out. Take it all. Jody,
Take it.
Jody, Dalvin Cook gets signed here, and if you were going to sign him, would you bring him in, and for what dollar amount?
I would love Dalvin Cook here. I don't think he'll be here. And the reports are today he's wanting close to $10 million a year. So, I mean, he's going to price himself out of Denver, really. And
He's going to price himself out of a lot of places at $10 million a year.
I'm still on the fence of where Javonte Williams is, and the way that Denver was kind of lackluster in, really addressing the running back. If you're going to be a run-first team and you went out and signed a guy that's never really been a starter in the league in Samaje Perine, what does that tell you what they think of Javonte Williams? Is he really going to be back week 1? Or are they really sold on Samaje? I mean, it's one of 3 things to me. Either Javonte will be ready week 1 and they have a lot of confidence in it, or the same with Samaje, they have a lot of confidence, or this team the reports are tricking you and it might not be as run heavy as you think, which I don't think so. So I think it's one of the first 2. Either they have I think it's both. I think they expect Williams back, and I think they have a lot of confidence in Perine. It was one of the first guys they went and got in free agency.
Right out the gate, buddy. Yep, absolutely, man. A good point. I like that little wrinkle at the end, even though you said you're not as hot on that idea. But let's face it, it's not like this offense is devoid of weapons when it comes to the receiving game at this. You look at this roster and we're already saying, no, we'll have to get rid of KJ Hamler. No, Alberto's out the door. Nope. We're already writing off guys before we even know if it goes even deeper than that. you know, who knows? Maybe Callaway doesn't lose the weight and he's a roster cut, even though we brought him in. It is that deep. That's not outside the realm of possibilities. So, as far as not making the 53, maybe he's a practice squad guy. You know, that
And maybe
these are
Russ
all.
and Peyton 100% click. And I mean,
Yep.
how are you going to tell Russ to stop throwing the ball when he's slinging it all over and back to his old self, you know?
100%, buddy. Kenny, appreciate the question. I do want to get over to Albert because I said, hey, let's all bring in one last thing if you want. And I almost forgot about you, Albert. And that would have been like devastating. I would have felt terrible. So didn't forget about you, Albert. What's the one last thing from this week that you want to talk about before we get out of here?
So I want to give Kenny something. Alexander Madison might indeed be the rushing leader because if Barkley is not playing, what else do they have? So yeah, and the Frank Clark signing here in the Chiefs neighborhood, I don't want to call it Chiefs Kingdom, Chiefs neighborhood, a lot of crying tears because what? Frank Clark is gone to the Broncos? I said, yeah. Don't we have 2 players of the Chiefs now?
That's
Yes,
true.
we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I see a lot of crybabies now because Frank Clark is gone, and that made my entire week.
That always is good. I'll still go back to the days of when Neil Smith came from the Chiefs over to the Broncos, man, and I was like, oh man, we're bringing in a chief. Oh, a chief, and then that year, especially that first year with Neil Smith, oh my goodness, he just obliterated and took complete happiness, pride, and blowing up the Chiefs too, man. He was all about it, and at that point, could you not be a Neil Smith fan? So I like that idea, man. Frank Clark, and I forget the fullback's name right off the top of my head, but fullback that we also got from the Chiefs. It'd be nice for them to take him to him.
And the funny thing is, they took Melvin Gordon. He took a lot of their salary away, and he didn't even play.
No, but he got that ring. He got that ring. Kenny did want to just jump in and says, I do want to say a big congratulations to the Nuggets and Jody and all you listeners who are Nuggets fan. Well-deserved. Enjoy it. By the way, I imagine Kenny, clap it up, man. Clap it up. I mean, 47 years, guys, man. Congratulations to the Nuggets. I was much more of a basketball fan, probably pre-2005, I would say. But, Nuggets have always been, in my mind, in my backyard. I watched a lot of Utah Jazz games. We used to go up against them a lot. Saw a lot of Jazz games and Nuggets games because, well, those are cheap games during the regular season as well. So, that being said, fantastically well-deserved. And speaking of fantastic, Kenny, and I can't believe I hadn't mentioned this to this point, but of course they have the great K&K Sports Show. They cover things like NBA where we don't. They'll be talking all about the championship, the run that the Nuggets have, the hoisting, the parade, the 47 years, what it means, can they continue? All of that will be addressed over on the K&K Sports Show. Check them out. They are fantastic. They're not just NBA. They're Major League Baseball. They're football. They're, you name it. They've got a great hockey guy over there right now. And you really can't beat it if you want that all-around sports show. Highly interactive. Get all their commenters, all their viewers involved, just like us. Gotta love what they do over at K&K Sports Show. Go check them out. So thank you, Kenny, for being part of it. So got one more comment. It's Kenny. One more time. He says, yeah, I can remember when Roger Clemens came to the Yankees. Like Albert said, made my decade. Yeah, Roger Clemens, longtime Boston Red Sox. I still remember that, going over to the hated Yankees and, taking it to the Red Sox and then loving it as well. So just like that, great content that you always get over on the K&K Sports Show. And he says, last thing from Kenny, he says, thanks, Keith. I'll be off tomorrow night because of my first job, but we have a special guest. Sis tomorrow night will be joining. Oh, man, I'm going to have to jump in if Sis is on board. I haven't seen Sis in a long time, man. So welcome back, Sis. Sorry you have to work, man. We're not clapping because you're working, Kenny, but we appreciate you guys very much over at the K&K Sports Show. Guys, I don't have a last thing. I'll be honest. My last thing is great thanks for Chad Jensen to jump on the show. Like I said, I know he's a busy man. He's a lead singer. He's a co-founder. He does a lot of background work over at Mile High Huddle when you're not already seeing him on the screen. Of course, he writes all the articles, and he gave us like 50 minutes tonight. So thank you, man. Thank you so much, Chad.
Yes,
appreciate
thank
you
very
so much. That was fantastic, you joining us, and can't express our appreciation enough. Here's a guy that also, when he's not joining our show, he's sometimes even in the chat and throwing down some stars for us as well. So, Chad, thank you very much. Thanks to Kenny. Thanks to Roy. Paul Montoya that was in earlier. I apologize. I threw your comments up there a couple of times, but didn't mention you by name. Michelle Knopper's obviously always in there supporting us, and I appreciate that as well, Michelle. So, guys, I think it's going to be, we're going to wrap up these mandatory mini camps. Just started today. Then it sounds like we're going to be a little bit silent. Of course, we're going to be breaking down those groups each and every week, continue to go through all of your Broncos players and position groups. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Sports Network. Guys, head on over to Rocky Mountain Sports Network, and I'm a little bit off, but Rocky Mountain Sports Network, you can check them out at rockymountainsn.com. You can also just check them out over on Facebook groups, and check out Rocky Mountain Sports Network. If you just type that into Facebook, you'll pull them up right away. Of course, we're brought to you also our sponsor, willowseasonings.com. Don't forget, if you go over to willowseasonings.com, because you're getting all your sauces and seasonings all lined up for summer right now, type in DBR 2023, get you 15% off. It's the only way you're going to get a discount right now over at willowseasonings.com is through our promo code, guys. So 15% off, huge, huge, huge there. It also is very huge because it's helping out a family in need. They're donating at $1 for every purchase that you're making over there. So do yourself a favor, do a family a favor, get yourself some amazing sauces, amazing seasonings, award-winning, and help out a family at the same time, guys. So I appreciate you guys. Appreciate Jody. Appreciate Albert. Appreciate everyone that's joined us in this evening. We're, of course, the Denver Bronco Roundup. We're on every Tuesday night, 7 o'clock at this time, 7 p.m. We'll catch you out next Tuesday. Check us out on social media. Of course, you can find us, the Denver Bronco Roundup, and you'll find out what topics we'll be talking about. We always post that up before the show. So until next week, guys, we're going to get out of here, right, guys? Little Mile High salute. And we're out, guys. Good night.